He popped a bottle of champagne the night he left me. I know because our neighbor Margaret sent me a photograph at 9:47 p.m., him and Dina Prescott on the back deck of our house, both of them laughing at something the camera hadn't caught. The timestamp on Margaret's photograph was 9:47 p.m. The timestamp on the escrow closing documents, signed that morning at 8:15 a.m. in a title company 12 blocks from our house, was 8:32 a.m. He left me at 4:00 p.m. He was drinking champagne by 9:47 p.m. And the house he was celebrating on, the house he had already told Dina she would be living in by the end of the month, had been sold. By me, at 8:32 that morning. Before he said a single word, while he was still asleep in the bed we shared, the escrow had closed in my name, the wire had settled. And Marcus Elaine Webb, my husband of 11 years, who had spent 4 of them planning an exit he believed I knew nothing about, was standing on a deck pouring champagne for a woman in a house that no longer belonged to either of them. He just didn't know it yet. Let me tell you how a woman closes escrow before her husband wakes up, and why I started planning it 14 months before he packed a single bag. My name is Celeste Webb. I am 43 years old. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, the second daughter of a real estate developer and a woman who taught me, before I was 12, that the most important sentence in any agreement is the one nobody reads until it matters. I am a licensed property developer. Not an agent, a developer. I find land, assess it, structure the acquisition, build, and sell. 14 years independently. $22 million in transactions across 6 Georgia counties. I have never needed a co-signer, a co-borrower, or a second name on a closing document. The house Marcus and I shared was purchased jointly in 2016, 4 bedrooms, Decatur, both names on the deed. A kitchen I had renovated in 2021 with my own development income, my own contractor, my own 6-week timeline. Marcus is 46. Commercial loan officer at a mid-size Atlanta bank. Good salary, company car, exactly enough flexibility to conduct a 4-year affair without anyone asking inconvenient questions. Dina Prescott is 34. Branch manager at a competing bank. She and Marcus met at an industry conference in Nashville in the spring of 2021 and have been in contact, based on subpoenaed cell records, an average of 14 times per day since June of that year. 14 times per day, for 4 years. I found out in January of 2024. Not because Marcus told me, because the specific combination of a late Thursday arrival, a cologne I didn't recognize, and 14 years of professional experience reading what contracts are actually saying told me everything I needed. Subscribe if you're new here. Hit the like button. Now let me tell you what I did the morning of January 19, 2024, and what I had already closed before Marcus Webb opened his eyes. January 2024, the discovery. Marcus came home on a Thursday at 11:23 p.m. I noted it the way I note everything, precisely, without reaction, as a data point. He smelled different, not perfume, cologne, underneath something else. The specific chemistry of a man who has been physically close to someone long enough that the scents have layered. I said nothing. I went to bed. Friday morning, I called my attorney. Her name is Vivian Cross. 53 years old. 30 years in family law, the last 15 in high-asset divorce. She has the stillness of a woman who has sat across from 1,000 Marcuses and knows exactly where the documents are before she opens a single drawer. I told her what I knew. She said, "Do not change your behavior, not 1 degree. No confrontations, no searches. I need 60 days to build the financial picture." I documented, February through April 2024, the money. Between June 2021 and January 2024, Marcus had moved $127,400 out of our joint savings in irregular transfers. Hotel rooms, dinners, a Savannah weekend he called a work conference. And jewelry, $3,800 at a Buckhead boutique in November 2023, 2 weeks before he gave me a watch from the same store for $340. $3,800 for Dina. $340 for me, same store, 2 weeks apart. Vivian placed that receipt on the desk between us and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the receipt didn't already say more precisely. I said, "What does this mean for distribution?" She said, "In Georgia, dissipation of marital assets to fund an affair is admissible. It significantly recalibrates the starting point in a judge's analysis." I said, "Good, what else do we need?" May through August 2024, the house. The Decatur house had been jointly titled since 2016. But I had renovated the kitchen entirely from my own income with a paper trail, every invoice, every payment, every contractor agreement in my name. Total, $74,000. Vivian said my renovation created a separate property claim that would meaningfully increase my equity position beyond a simple 50-50 split. I said, "I don't want 50-50. I want out." She looked at me. "I don't want to fight over this house for 18 months while Marcus lives in it with Dina. I want to sell it before he knows it's happening. I want the proceeds secured, and I want to file before the champagne goes flat." She said, "Celeste, you cannot sell a jointly titled property without his signature." I said, "I know, which is why I haven't told you the rest yet." I had been watching the Decatur market for 8 months. The house, purchased at $510,000 in 2016, had comparable sales running $780,000 to $810,000. I had a buyer, a couple relocating from Charlotte, pre-approved, motivated, who had made an offer after a private showing I arranged on a Saturday when Marcus was, as he described it, at a team golf day. I had a problem, his signature. Vivian leaned forward. "Walk me through what you're thinking." I said, "I file for divorce first. In Georgia, filing triggers a standing order preserving marital assets. Then I negotiate the sale as part of settlement, with my attorney controlling the closing timeline and the court authorizing the transfer." She was quiet for a moment. "You want the buyer under contract, the divorce filed, and the settlement moving before Marcus realizes any of it." I said, "I want escrow to close in my name. The rest is paperwork." She said, "I've been doing this for 30 years. I have never had a client come in with a buyer already under contract." I said, "Is that a problem?" She said, "No, that's a head start." September 2024 through February 2025, the build. 14 months of account statements, receipts, timestamps, and dissipation documentation. 14 months of managing the Charlotte buyers through a holding pattern while Vivian assembled the petition. Marcus noticed nothing. A man conducting a 4-year affair and believing himself invisible notices exactly what threatens the story he's telling himself, which is nothing. Every Tuesday, I sent Vivian a file update. Every Tuesday, she confirmed receipt. Then, on a Saturday morning in March, Marcus came downstairs with the particular gravity of a man who has rehearsed a sentence and is now in the room where he has to say it. He said, "Celeste, I want a divorce." I looked at him. I said, "Okay." He blinked. "I know this is a lot. I want us to be adults about this." I said, "When do you want to be out?" "End of the month." "I have somewhere I'm going." "End of the month is fine." He looked at me the way a man looks at a door he expected to be locked that opened immediately. Are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine. I'll call my attorney Monday." He went to bed. I called Vivian at 10:47 p.m. She said, "Perfect." I file Monday, petition served at his office Tuesday, and Celeste the buyers. I said, "They're ready. They've been ready since January." She said, "Tell them we're moving." Before we get to the morning of March 22nd, subscribe if you're new, hit the like button. The woman who plans before the storm doesn't get wet. Now let me tell you about the morning the escrow closed. Strike 1. The petition. Monday, March 17th. Vivian filed at 9:02 a.m. The court issued the standing order preserving marital assets at 9:15. The process server was en route by 9:17. Marcus was served at 11:43 a.m. at his desk, in front of 2 colleagues. By a man named Ronald, who Vivian described as professionally efficient. One of those colleagues, a woman named Teresa who had her own set of observations about Marcus's Thursday absences, texted me at 11:51. He went completely white, Celeste, like chalk. He asked Ronald if there was a mistake, Ronald said no. Marcus called me at 12:03 p.m. Georgia is one-party consent. I recorded it. He said, Celeste, what is this? I said, you asked for a divorce Saturday. I told you I'd call my attorney Monday. I called her Monday. You have a standing order on the house. I have plans. Marcus, the standing order protects both of us during proceedings. Vivian Cross is my attorney. I recommend you retain someone by end of week. He called back 4 times after I hung up. I answered none of them. Strike 2, the authorization, Wednesday through Thursday. Vivian filed for court authorization to proceed with the sale on Wednesday, arguing 3 points. Carrying costs the parties couldn't sustain, a ready buyer at fair market value, and Marcus's $127,400 in documented dissipation as grounds for an expedited sale with proceeds held in escrow, with my $74,000 renovation credit recognized as separate property. The judge reviewed the motion Thursday afternoon. She signed at 4:47 p.m. Vivian called me at 5:02. We're cleared, you can close. I said schedule it Saturday, 8:15 a.m. Strike 3, the closing, March 22nd, 8:15 a.m. The title company was 12 blocks from the house. I arrived at 8:08. David and Michelle Park arrived at 8:11. Sandra, the title officer who had closed 4 of my previous development transactions, had the documents prepared and tabbed. Marcus was not present. Marcus was not required to be present. The court authorization substituted for his signature. That is what a court authorization does. I signed my name 11 times. Wire confirmation arrived at 8:32 a.m. $797,000 from the Parks to escrow. Net proceeds after mortgage payoff, $579,000 held pending distribution. My $74,000 renovation credit pre-designated as separate property reimbursement. Sandra stamped the final page. She looked up. Congratulations, Celeste, it's closed. I walked out at 8:39 a.m. with a closing disclosure in my briefcase and drove home. Marcus was still asleep. I made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table, the kitchen I had renovated, the cabinets I had chosen, the countertops I had sourced, and drank my coffee in the specific quiet of a woman who has just done the last thing she needed to do. At 9:00 a.m., Marcus came downstairs. You're up early. Errands. He left at 10:30. He did not come back. At 9:47 p.m., Margaret sent me the photograph. I looked at it for 4 seconds. I forwarded it to Vivian with one line, for the file. Then I went to bed. Drop your country in the comments right now, one word. I want to see every country watching the champagne go flat. Hit the like button while you type. Now let me tell you what Marcus's attorney found when he pulled the title records Monday. Monday, March 24th. Marcus retained an attorney over the weekend. Craig Holder, Buckhead firm, the kind of attorney who takes cases from men who believe their situation is more complicated than it is. Craig pulled the title records Monday morning. Called Vivian at 10:14. The Decatur property closed Saturday. Yes. There's a court authorization on file. Signed Thursday afternoon by Judge Reyes. You should have a copy by now. The proceeds. $579,000 in court-supervised escrow, pending equitable distribution. Craig was quiet for 5 seconds. Marcus is going to say he wasn't notified. Vivian said he was served Tuesday. The motion was filed Wednesday and docketed, public record. Hearing was Thursday. He had 3 days and a retained attorney's responsibility to monitor the docket. Is there a procedural objection you'd like to file, or shall we discuss the distribution schedule? I'll call you back. Marcus called me at 11:30. Celeste, you sold the house. Yes. We were going to, Dina. We had plans. Marcus, the closing was court authorized. Is there a legal question for Vivian or a personal one for me? 6 seconds of silence. Where are we supposed to live? Marcus, that's not a question I can answer for you. Dina is a bank branch manager. She earns a salary. I recommend she start looking. You did this on purpose. I filed for divorce the day after you asked me for one. I sold a marital asset through a court-authorized process at fair market value. Everything I did is in the public record. Goodbye, Marcus. The dissipation file. Vivian submitted the $127,400 documentation in the equitable distribution filing on March 28. Hotel receipts, the Savannah weekend, cell record timelines, and Exhibit 7, the Buckhead jewelry receipt, $3,800 for Dina, $340 for me, 2 weeks apart. Same store. Craig called after reviewing it. My client wants to discuss settlement. I'm available Monday. The settlement conference. Craig's opening, 50-50 split of the $579,000 with the $127,400 treated as ordinary marital expenditure. Vivian placed Exhibit 7 on the table. Craig, the watch he bought his wife cost $340. The necklace he bought his mistress cost $3,800. Same store, 2 weeks apart. Would you like to make that argument to Judge Reyes, or shall we discuss a number that doesn't require it? Craig asked for a recess, 31 minutes. He came back at 60-40. Vivian held at 70-30. 70-30 is aggressive. Exhibit 7 is aggressive. We're responding proportionally. Craig called back in 48 hours. Final settlement, $74,000 renovation reimbursement off the top. Remaining $505,000 split 68-32. Celeste receives $343,400. Marcus receives $161,600. One non-monetary term, Marcus's attorney fought for 4 days and lost. A formal acknowledgement that the $127,400 in dissipated assets would be disclosed to his employer's HR department. Marcus's position as a commercial loan officer requires periodic ethics reviews. A signed civil acknowledgement of financial misconduct is a reviewable event. It stayed in. Dina Prescott is a bank branch manager. Her employment agreement, like most at federally insured institutions, includes a conduct standard requiring employees not to create legal, reputational, or regulatory risk for the institution. When Marcus's HR disclosure was filed, Dina's bank became aware, through the public record, that their branch manager had been a participant in a financial misconduct situation spanning 31 months. Their compliance department reviewed her communications and found 3 instances where she had advised Marcus, by text, on how to structure transfer amounts to avoid triggering fraud alerts. She used her professional knowledge of fraud detection thresholds to help him move money without being caught. That is not a personal conduct violation. That is a federal banking regulation violation. Dina resigned in May before the formal investigation concluded. The findings were referred to the FDIC. She has not worked in banking since. I did not file the complaint that triggered the review. The public record triggered it. I simply made sure the record was public, complete, and correctly documented. The document always finds its way to the right desk. In August of 2025, I bought a 3-bedroom bungalow in Virginia Highland. Purchase price, $498,000. Down payment, $150,000 cash from the settlement from the escrow account that had opened on a Saturday morning while Marcus was still asleep. Sole owner, sole borrower, one name on the deed. Mine. I closed on a Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. The title officer handed me the keys with the efficient warmth of someone who finds this part satisfying every time. I drove to the house. Stood in the front yard, the mature magnolia in the corner, the original 1940s porch floor I was already planning to refinish for about 90 seconds. Not crying, not celebrating. The specific stillness of a woman who has been building toward a morning for 14 months and is now standing in it. I went inside, put the keys on the kitchen counter, opened my laptop, started reviewing the permits for the porch refinish. It is October of 2025. 7 months since the escrow closed. 4 months since the settlement. Marcus is in an apartment in Sandy Springs. His Aunt Carolyn, who called me in March to say she was mortified by that boy, still calls me on the first Sunday of every month for reasons neither of us has formally explained. She mentioned in August that Marcus had called her crying, asking if she thought I would consider talking. She told him, "Marcus, Celeste is not a door you get to knock on twice. Dina is not managing a bank branch. What else she is doing, I haven't looked. Here is what I want to say." Marcus Webb spent 4 years planning an exit. He moved money. He rehearsed the conversation. He picked a Saturday morning, said the sentence he'd been building toward, and waited for the grief to be louder than anything else in the room. He miscalculated the room. Because the woman in that room had been building something of her own for 14 months. Not from anger, from the professional instinct of a developer who understands that the best time to start a project is before you need it. I didn't plan against Marcus. I planned for myself. Financial picture, dissipation file, attorney, buyer, court authorization, closed escrow, all before 8:39 a.m. on a Saturday morning while he was still asleep. He woke up and poured champagne on a deck he did not own. He celebrated the beginning of something that was already over before it started. The best investment I ever made was the phone call placed on the morning of January 19th, 2024. Not because Vivian Cross is exceptional, though she is, because I placed it before he knew there was a reason to. The document you file before the problem happens is always worth more than the document you file after. The escrow had already closed. It was always going to close. He just wasn't in the room when it did. Quiet women eventually speak, and when they do, the room goes still. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.